Welcome to episode 103 of The Route, presented by White Whale Marketing. The Route is a glorified sports business coffee chat that has a new guest every episode as they share their experiences and route in sports. As always, I'm Christopher Nascimento, and let's get started. If you haven't already and you're watching us on, YouTube, you can see us here at the top of the screen. It says at The Route Sports. So follow us on social media. We're on every platform, especially if you're listening to this. LinkedIn's a great way for you to build your network, start your network. It's a great place to kind of start, connecting with people. So check us out on LinkedIn. But we're also on, the traditional ones like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And then for YouTube, we'll be under the White Whale Marketing account with our own playlist. So check us out there. Give us a follow. Additionally, if you haven't already, please subscribe or follow the podcast. We're on, I believe, 8 or 10 different platforms, so audio and video, Apple, Spotify, Google, etc. So when you're on those platforms listening to our episodes, take the time to just, subscribe, follow, rate 5 stars, leave a comment, and then even on YouTube, leave a comment, like, etc. These engagements allow us to grow a little further, and then we can continue having these episodes and speaking with all these great guests where hopefully you can, get some insights from that. So thank you for that. And then, as always, the last thing before we kind of get into today's guest, quick little message from BetStamp. So if you haven't heard already and you haven't listened to this episode, with sports, a big topic right now is sports betting, right? So I'm sure if you're listening to this, this may be something you've dabbled in. And, even myself, when I'm watching a game, I typically like to live bet sometimes where I'll see something like, hey, let me put a couple dollars on the underdog here just to kind of maybe make something up. And then without failure, sometimes my buddy will do the exact same thing. Then he'll get a better odds, or then we're watching the intermission show and their sponsor or partners providing better odds, and then you're like, damn, I missed out on a couple dollars there. Well, then if you don't want to be a fool like me, and where I was just using one sports book during these seasons or during these bets, the solution is to use something like BetStamp. So compare the best available odds among sports books. The only way you're going to get an edge in online sports betting is by having an account with multiple sports books. So download the BetStamp app or go to betstamp.app/Ontario and use the code WHALE. So you can get access to their affiliates and their prices. BetStamp allows you to verify the existence of a proposed bet with their corresponding odds, and this provides you to buy and sell picks with full transparency, which is great. Users selling sports picks on BetStamp do not sacrifice any royalty or cut to the app. It's completely free. Free. That's a great word right there. And as always, if you want an edge in sports betting, use BetStamp by downloading their app or visiting betstamp.app/Ontario and using the code WHALE to get access to all of their affiliates and their pricing. So check them out. They're a great partner, and it's something that I even use myself. My buddies use. I'm putting everyone that I know on it because it's a great tool, truly. So with that now done, we can get to the main topic of the episode, which is our guest. So I'd now like to welcome someone who has represented FC Edmonton on the field and now off of it. Manager of Partnership and Fan Engagement, Thiago Silva. Welcome to The Route. How's it going?
I'm doing fine, Christopher. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. And as I was kind of saying before this, I thought you had a great route, and that's what it's all about, right? We're kind of showing the different ways to kind of go from A to B to get into sports. So without further ado, do you mind maybe sharing how your route began, right? You began as a professional footballer, and how did you end up now in the current position?
No, absolutely, Christopher. I hope you didn't invite me because you thought I was the UFC fighter or the famous Thiago Silva from Chelsea.
Yeah.
But born and raised in Brazil, every single kid there, they want to be a famous professional soccer player, and unfortunately, it's very hard. Not everyone can make it, right? But I went through all the youth development in Brazil, playing for big clubs in youth, first division clubs, but once you get to that age around 17, 18 years old, to make that jump to the professional team is always really hard. And my club back then was just started sending me to different clubs. I started going to different clubs, smaller clubs on a loan. in order for me to get more experience. And but it was not, the whole situation was not the ideal for me. My parents like, Thiago, you're 17, 18 now, you're not really focusing on studying.
Mhm.
Perhaps you should start, kind of giving up on soccer and maybe go to university. And then, parents, they are always right. And I started looking into some opportunities to go to the United States and play soccer and get a scholarship for it. So I'll be still playing soccer, and I'll be making my parents happy as well.
Mhm.
Um, After doing some researches, and I had some videos from playing youth, I sent to some coaches in the United States. Ended up getting a scholarship to move to Alabama.
Mhm.
um, I lived there for almost 2 years.
Wow.
In the United States, it was a very very good experience, a very different experience in Alabama. Um, I was studying at Faulkner University. After those 2 years, I moved back to Brazil, but I had such a great experience that I was asking myself, I was like, yeah, I do want to go somewhere else where I can take advantage of having a scholarship and play soccer as well, and get a degree from a different country. Then I ended up coming to Canada, Edmonton.
Mhm.
Um, my first option was NAIT, as Northern Alberta Institute of Technology. uh, I had a scholarship to come here. I played 3 years for NAIT. Was very successful here. We won nationals in 2011. Um, I was studying business administration, and my last year I moved to Mount Royal University, but my degree is actually from NAIT.
Mhm.
And then after that, I start kind of like changed a little bit of my career path, because I had a business degree, kind of majoring finance. My plan was to just get my degree and move back home, but then I met my wife in school, and now like Edmonton is home, Canada is home. I have one son, I have a dog, and so now Canada is home. It's not an option to move back to Brazil, but as soon as I finished school, after playing, professionally in Brazil, after playing school in college, university, United States and Canada, I started working in the banking industry.
Mhm.
Um, I worked in the banking industry for 8 years. I did everything. I was financial advisor, bank advisor. Like I started as a teller, um, and because I had in my mind like, okay, well now it's forget about soccer, kind of move on uh, to the real world, right? Like soccer is
Mhm.
not, it's not the real job. It's not a real job to be working in soccer back then. And and then I started working in banking, which, to be honest to you, Christopher, it was a mistake, but I thank God I realized the mistake that I did, as soon as like 2 years ago, when COVID hit.
Mhm.
uh, I talking to my wife, I kind of realized that I need to find like it's important for me to have a work life balance, to do something that I'm passionate about it, something that I love. And that's when I start doing some researches, because I already had the experience from playing on the field.
Mhm.
I was After I was coaching as well, like part time in the different youth academies here in Edmonton, Calgary. And but I felt like I need more education in the sports industry, and I did some research. There's so many different programs out there, um, and I came across the FBA, which is a master's in football business,
Mhm. Mhm.
from Switzerland. And I thought it was very interesting. It kind of checked all the boxes that I was doing the research for. Like they had an internship. Um, I last year I ended up doing this course, and then last year I was in Europe for 3 months. So we went to Portugal, Spain, We
Mhm.
got to see different clubs, different business operations, associations, federations. So that kind of like exposed me to different scenarios, different in soccer, uh, and gave me more knowledge and experience from how the soccer world works behind the scenes. And I thought it was the missing piece, because I already had the experience on the field, coaching, and now with this master's degree. So after I finished my master's degree, I came back to Edmonton. I sent my resume. I start like kind of trying to find my way into the soccer industry here in Edmonton, because my family is living here. Um,
Mhm.
and I got a contact with the president of FC Edmonton. We start talking. I decided to send him my resume, and a couple of weeks later, like, Thiago, there's an opportunity here as manager of partnerships of FC Edmonton. Would you be interested? Would you be willing to do some interviews and see if this is the best job for you? And so I did the interview. I liked it, and they offered me the job. And it's been like over 3 months now that I'm working for FC Edmonton. Um, and I think, so I played for FC Edmonton in 2010 when they first started,
Mhm.
and now it's nice to be back after 12 years, and seeing where things are at, and how consolidated the club is here in Edmonton.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's an amazing route so far. Where it's so interesting, right? Because you covered a lot of ground, just even in the terms of like geography, right? Brazil, the States, and then Canada, then going to Europe for a bit. So that's all very interesting. I like to kind of go back all the way to the start, right? When you're talking about growing up in Brazil and playing soccer, football there. Obviously, a completely different landscape than here in Canada, right? Where it's hard to kind of break in that next level. So, what do you mind maybe touching on that? Like, what kind of experience was it like, and maybe did you ever have the opportunity to maybe share the field with someone who's now tearing it up in Europe?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is, I tell people, like, the experience from, I might be biased, but I think we produce the best players in the world. For the last 100 years we did, and for the next 100 years we're still going to be producing. It has to do with our culture.
Hmm.
And it's hard to export that culture to other countries. But when I was 10 years old, I actually signed my first contract, um, which I wasn't getting paid. I was getting, allowances, but with the first division club. So throughout my youth development, I always played in big clubs in Brazil, and so I shared the field with a lot of big players. There's one that won Champions League with Porto when Mourinho was there. His
Oh
name
yeah.
is Carlos Roberto. Um, and other players like that played in Europe. Some of them play in the national team, the Olympic national team, and like in Brazil, you have, like, not a lot of people know, but we have over 600 professional teams. It's a big country. It's a big population. So there are a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of players taking the same path that you are, and it makes it really hard to I feel like, if I had stayed in Brazil,
Hmm.
I could have played professionally, but continued playing professionally. However, I would probably not be a famous player, and
Hmm.
and so I kind of realized that right away, and then decided to take advantage of the skills that I had. I'm like, okay, well, at least I can earn a scholarship
Yeah.
in the States or in Canada, right? Um, but it's hard to say. I could have stayed. I could. It's one of those things that uh, I'm happy with the role that I took.
Hmm.
I have a family. I have a degree from Canada, uh, and I'm very happy. But who knows if I had decided to stay and keep trying, right? In Brazil, but the quality, the talent that we have in Brazil, especially in the youth academy, is just amazing. But that being said, like, I was surprised when I came to Canada. Like, the level is good as well. um, and like even in the United States, it's very challenging as well.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. First, touching on the aspect of development. Obviously, you're saying it's the culture there, right? Where there's so much competition. Obviously, that competition makes you better. But do you, how would you say it? Let's say you had the exact same talent, but you were in Canada or the U.S., Europe, wherever else in the world. Do you think that things would have gone differently, or is it the same thing where if you have the talent, you would have been found regardless, or you would have broken through?
If I Yeah, that's a good question because I think if I had grew up in Canada or US, most likely I wouldn't have the same talent that I had because I was born in Brazil. Again, it has to do with the culture that we have in Brazil. It has to do with the music that we listen to. It has to do with the way we behave, the way things work in Brazil, and that honestly it helps to shape our soccer players. Uh,
Hmm.
but it, coming to United States and Canada, I was very successful. Like I said, we won nationals in eight. I was MVP in different situations, in different college for different colleges. Uh, but as you said, like it's like I see a lot of good players in Canada, but there isn't much competition, right? Like it's not like they're playing high level every day or against high level players every day, as opposed like in Brazil we are. In Brazil, even when you're playing on the street soccer, it's very competitive. Nobody wants to lose, and we do that every day, right? Here in Canada, the biggest difference is that the only time the kids are playing soccer is when they go to the academies, right? In Brazil, we go to academy, we play soccer. We go to school, we play soccer. We go home, we play soccer. It's like we're always playing soccer.
Yeah, as always, it's more so like Canada with hockey, right? Where in the winter, right, with all the different rinks or playing on road hockey or different things like that, where more
Yeah,
so the cultural aspect for sure makes a lot of sense.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the weather doesn't help very
the
much
weather,
too.
yeah, Edmonton and Ottawa too, right? It gets very cold. Where that's kind of leads me to my next question. Where so I actually lived in Boston for 1 year when I was a teenager for my dad's work, and obviously I'm born and raised in Canada, and Boston's only I think 7 hours from here by car. So initial first impression was like, oh, that's not the biggest difference in the world. But I felt the culture shock, like moving to the states, and I didn't even live in like the city, but I lived in like a suburb. But that was the culture shock for me. So I was kind of curious about that aspect, where Brazil to Alabama, and then maybe even more so to Canada, especially with the weather, culture. I'd love to hear a bit more about that, and yeah, just very interested in that.
Of course, yeah. No, I get asked a lot about that question. Because and it's interesting because moving from Brazil to Alabama, it wasn't a big cultural shock because I was my first time in the United States. So when I moved there, I was like, okay, well, this is what US looks like. This is America.
Yeah.
And but then when I moved from Alabama to Canada, that was a big culture shock. I'm like, wow, hold on, like that's it's a big difference. It's a big change. I felt like, and I kind of learned and improved my English living in Alabama. But then when I moved to Canada, I felt like I had to learn again because it was a different English. It was a different. I was my meeting people here like, oh, Thiago, I'm sorry, that's not English. um, so yeah, the cultural shock between moving from Alabama to Canada was to me was more noticeable. But moving to like Alabama, it was awesome, especially like the weather. It was good weather, more like in Brazil, uh, and it can be really hot. Actually, like very very hot in the summer.
Yeah, yeah,
But I the couple of years that I was there, uh, nowadays I can tell that there is a big difference. But when I first I was just fresh, off the boat. I just my first time out of Brazil going to United States, so it wasn't that big a difference. But then when I moved from Alabama to Canada, I was like, wow. So now I'm experienced the real world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know that's interesting. And one of the things I want to ask is because, so last weekend was Canada Day at the time of this recording, and I was telling you beforehand, my family's Portuguese, and obviously my grandparents are fully from there. That's the only language they speak, and they've lived here for a long time now. I think it was 24 degrees or something. We were having a family barbecue, and my grandma's in a vest, and she's still complaining. And I think it was because of the wind, but she still complains sometimes. Where even though she's been here for decades, she's still never gonna get used to the cold. So I was just like curious about that because sometimes it hits different, especially with the wind.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. So in Alabama, the weather like during the winter was -1, like the coldest, right?
Okay.
And it was cold for me. But when I moved to Edmonton, so my
Yeah.
first year I got -42. It was the second coldest place in the earth. Uh, yeah. So people often ask me like, Tiago, why Edmonton? Like, why did you, it's such a big change, right? But and this is like I was never afraid to come to Edmonton. My parents always support me like a lot too. Like they always like, Tiago, you go, you don't like it, you come back. You always have a home here, right? To come back to. And but like soccer, like playing soccer since I was 10, I had to move to different cities. I played for different clubs. I wasn't always around my parents, so that kind of like built me. It built like some sort of a protection. I guess I was never afraid of anything, right?
Yeah.
And so moving from Brazil to Alabama and then Canada, it was I was always driven. I was like, I want to see what's like. I want to learn. I want to get more experience. So I was always up for a new challenge, and I think that comes from playing soccer a
Yeah.
lot, at least from my side. And in Canada, like now I'm used to it's been 13 years that I've been here, and I I learned how to ski, love skiing,
Nice.
and in the winter I'm just looking forward to the winter so I can go to the mountains, the Rocky
Mhm.
Mountains here, and go skiing. That's how I spend my of my winter, and it is like when I go back to Brazil, I feel the difference, and sometimes it's actually hard to get used to the weather in Brazil now, but I like it. It, it's been a good trip so far.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, just one of the things they're just talking about, like the weather change. I remember I had friends from Australia, they came to live here for a bit. And one of the times, I remember one of them was like, hey, I never knew wind could hurt you so much. And I'm sure maybe that's something that kind of happened as well. But yeah, you're talking about taking on these challenges, right? And that kind of follows perfectly in what I wanted to ask you next, where you're talking about, moving on to the real world, right? Where maybe at the time you're like, oh, soccer, working in soccer, that's not the real world. And I found that funny that you said that because when I was, I think, 16, 17, I went to go work at the stadium here in Ottawa. I wanted that. I was set. That was going to be my first job. I was going to work at, I was such a sports fan. I was like, I want to work at the stadium and just work on game days. I ended up working there for 3 years, I think maybe almost exactly, and I loved it. It was the best experience ever. And then similarly, I was in university. I was studying accounting at the time. I was like, oh, like I got to go into the real world, right? So I went to go get an accounting job, and I left this position where, I had like an inside track with this good organization in Ottawa where they had a few teams. And once I went into accounting, and I was telling you this beforehand, I just realized in this accounting job when I was there for years, like, oh, like I hate this. Like, this is not what I can do for the next 40 years of my life. And fortunately, I learned it after 1 year and I was still in my 20s. And the way my school worked, it was easy to just switch and kind of move into marketing. But I found that very interesting because I think that's something a lot of people kind of realize, where I think I've had people on this podcast also share how, you know, there's typically an arc in sports sometimes where maybe people start off as interns and they kind of grow up with the team. But then as soon as they get maybe to, let's say, the term of maturity where maybe they start developing families, getting married, so like 20, early 30s, that age, a lot of them end up leaving, right? And going maybe into like the financial sector, as you're saying, or tech, etc. But at the same time, what they were sharing was they also then see a bunch of them coming back because then they have the same realization. So I kind of wanted to touch on that because I think for those listening, that's something, if you haven't experienced yet, that's something to get into. But even if you have, like, just kind of relating to that. So I'd love to kind of hear about that because I think that's very relevant for everyone in sports business.
Oh yes, I know absolutely, and that's you know we do get a lot of pressure from society, from parents, from families, from family, because they always, they have that mentality, the old mentality, that the real role, you have to be doing work in a bank or doing accounting, or be a doctor. But throughout my life, I kind of realized that you have to do what you love, what you're passionate about, and so that's the most important thing. I I spent 8 years working in a bank, and if I were to die at 90, uh, I should have lived until 98, because the bank took 8 years of my life. And so, and the earlier like you can realize that, the better, because so you can make the change, you can start doing things. And there is a downside, don't get me wrong. Like, for example, with your podcast, I'm sure you work 24/7, right? Like, it's when you love what you're doing, you're always thinking about, like right now I love what I do. I'm always thinking about, oh, who can I bring, like which company can I bring to FC Edmonton? Maybe
Mhm.
sometimes I'm at the grocery store Sunday night, and then like, oh, maybe I should reach out to this company, maybe I should reach out to,
Yeah.
you never stop thinking, right? That when you're doing something that you love, you're working 24/7. And it's the same when you have your own business. Like, you hear that a lot too.
Mhm, mhm.
It's important, it doesn't feel like it's a work, or it doesn't feel like you have to, you just want to, right? um,
Yeah.
and to me, like, I grew up playing soccer. Soccer was, part of my life. I kind of
Mhm.
changed it a little bit, roads, and then, but it wasn't too late. I realized that I had to go back, and there's so many opportunities in the soccer industry, in the sports industry. It's growing a lot, not just in, I mean, like in North America, not just in soccer, but like all the sports, right? Like, uh, there's a lot of opportunities in the marketing, like, and mostly like in the soccer industry, I feel like the clubs are being managed more like business.
Mhm, mhm.
And that's why there are more opportunities coming up, like there's HR departments, marketing departments, social media. And so there's a lot of opportunity, not just in soccer though, but in sports in general. And it's an opportunity for you to do something that's challenging, but if you're passionate about sports and specifics, sport, it could be rugby, hockey, whatever, there is always room for growing.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. Where, sometimes when you have that realization, is that's when you kind of realize all the different opportunities. Where maybe beforehand you're stuck in the mindset where, I was like, oh, I'll just be an accountant, or people, I'll just be lawyers. Like, I interviewed someone yesterday, and they're like, yeah, it's just gonna be a lawyer, and then they actually took the time to be like, oh, you know what? Let me hold off on that. It took a gap year, and then they end up getting into sports betting, and then now they end up selling this company for almost $100 million, and they kind of just hold off and realize, hey, like, that's not what I'm actually passionate about, right? So they kind of went their own route, let's say, right? So
Exactly.
I, I definitely agree with that.
And
And,
Christian, don't get me wrong though. Like, I worked 8 years in the bank, but I learned a lot there, right?
mhm, mhm,
No matter
mhm,
what you do, you're always gonna take something from it.
for
Like,
sure.
for example, customer service. Like, yeah, I was dealing with clients all the time, so
Mhm.
they really helped me with that. Financial, like, there's a lot of things that you can learn, but and that I was able to take from the financial industry and bring to my current job, right?
For
But you
sure.
have to do what you love. Like, every day, it doesn't matter what you do, you're gonna learn something from it. But at the end of the day, you need to know where your goal is, and kind of take that direction.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I guess maybe before we kind of continue along, I may be sharing like what types of things you were able to learn. Because maybe, let's say someone's listening and they're in, financial, government, tech, etc. And then maybe you can help them, like, spark something like, oh, this is something that maybe I could provide value, right? If I were to go interview for a sports team. So what type of things did you learn when you're in the financial sector, that obviously you're touching on, the customer service aspect, but like, are there maybe more things like that that were a little more intricate, where like, hey, like, I never realized doing, task Y will then result in, helping me develop the skill set here now in sports.
Absolutely. Christopher, I'm not a sporting like I when I started working in banking, I noticed that I realized that a lot of people were not very uh, how do I say this, like banking educated. They don't
Mhm.
know much about interest rates,
I think the word like financially literate.
financially literate. Perfect. Um, and they don't know much about credit cards, line of credits, interest rate, how the whole banking industry works, operate, and that's
Mhm.
very important, right? Like that's very crucial for, especially for young kids, for young
Mhm.
for students, for example. And when I started doing that, I'm like, imagine these players, they're 17, 16, 15. A lot of them are already getting paid. So we're like, how are they managing their money? Are they just getting credit? Because it's so easy nowadays to get credit card, right? Are they just getting credit cards? Do they even know how it works, the interest rate, and do they know they have to be paying every month? Or and so I one of my projects in the future is that if I'm a sporting director of a club, I do want to provide classes for the youth development of players, uh, with financing classes, the second language, and some coaching courses as well, because I believe that will develop them as they'll develop their brain as well as them as a person, right? Like, um, even if they don't become professional players, at least they're gonna have a good knowledge. So, okay, well, you know, I like finance. I want to maybe study finance and take this road in my life and this path, and then, but I there are always, like, small things that we can take from working in the finance industry. I know a lot of people, they a lot of people moving from the banking industry to sports industry because they were working marketing, for example.
Mhm.
It's a bit different kind of marketing, but there's a it's definitely, you can definitely take those skills and apply in the sports industry. Um, I don't know if that answers
No,
your
no, absolutely.
question.
It for sure does. And to be honest, what you're saying is very relevant. Where, even when I was working, let's say at Atletico, I remember I was engaged with players all the time. And let's say there's like the team photo shoot for merchandise, and the players are actually in their, regular lifestyle apparel, right, or gear, whatever they're wearing. And I still remember there was like some kids that were not kids, but they were teenagers that were on the team, and they're obviously earning a full time salary essentially. And then, right, if they had the financial literacy, they would, invest that, let it compound, and kind of let it grow from there. And then I was seeing that, they had like $3,000 shoes on. And I was like, oh man, like that's awful, right? Because who knows like where the career ends up going, but especially like, I have a dad that was in, finance, and he like essentially forced my sister and I to read this book when we were 16, and he would pay us like $5 a chapter because he's like, you have to read this book. So obviously $5, $10, whatever it was a chapter, like, okay, fine, like I'll read it. And it actually developed like a foundation where, like, okay, like I understand a bit now why it's important, right, to compound and the interest rates and all that different stuff. So no, I definitely agree where it's applicable in all different aspects.
Well, absolutely, and it gives you a foundation, right? It's not like you're gonna be the financial expert, but that definitely gives you a foundation, and helps you to save money, helps you with investments, helps you to understand more about the financial industry, and it makes harder for banking for banks to kind of trick you,
Yeah, yeah. And I guess before we kind of start wrapping up the podcast, I just wanted to touch on quickly maybe your master's program and then a bit on FC Edmonton as well. 'Cause I think one of the big questions that I kind of receive sometimes from people listening is, they ask like, hey, like what should I do for school, right? Because, or hey, like what should I do post secondary, when they have that revelation of, hey, like I don't want to work in finance, I want to get more expertise. How did you decide to pick? I know you said you did your research, but was it specifically, hey, I want to get into soccer or football, that's why I picked this program versus another one? How did you kind of go about that? Because I think that's something that a lot of people may be listening kind of look into further to kind of advance their education specifically in sports.
Yes. I mean, there are, like, when you're doing your research, there are different aspects that you need to consider, right? Like money, budget is definitely one of them. That's very important. But because I really want to focus in soccer, and there was a specific program for soccer, and that was one of the reasons I picked this specific program that I did. But the program offered like an internship with different partners around the world, right? So, for example, Benfica was one of the partners. Um, there is Galatasaray. There are big soccer clubs involved. So I thought that would be a good opportunity for me to do an internship with one of those associations, and then eventually, hopefully, get a job with them afterwards,
Yeah.
right? But what ended up happening was that I finished the degree and then I got a job right away. I didn't even do my internship. I didn't even needed
Oh,
to do an internship. Yes.
wow.
Um, and I was happy with it because I'm in Edmonton. It's not like I had to move to a different city. I have a son, and so it would be too complicated for me to be moving around. But it's important to do your research. It's important to reach out to people that already did the course, to people that are thinking about doing the course. um, the more information, the better. It doesn't
Yeah.
hurt to even there'll always be some people complaining about the course. It's good to hear them as well, not
Hmm.
only the pros but the cons as well. And again, the more information you can get, the better. I particularly want to be in soccer. I want to be uh, just in the soccer industry. So I really focus on something that a program that really gave me more knowledge and kind of opened up my eyes to the soccer industry. And but there's a lot of other courses that's more like sports management, that could, and perhaps you started sports management and ended up going to a different sector, different
Yeah.
area. It's it really
Yeah,
depends, but yeah, again, it's doing your homework, like
for
research
sure.
and reach out to people. We all have LinkedIn. Reach out, ask questions, um, and and see what fits best for you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Where obviously this is a tool where every single guest I essentially get from this podcast, they're not from my network already. They're all from LinkedIn, right? We're just reaching out and mutual connections, or just kind of doing that cold pitch of, hey, like this is why I think you should come on the podcast. But I definitely agree with that. And I guess before we kind of end up wrapping it up, do you mind maybe sharing? You shared how you got to FC Edmonton, but what has it been like just initially starting there? Right, you've been there for a few months now. What is it like, and what do you see happening in the future with it?
Um, it's, I mean, for me, it's going really well. It's been only 3 months that I've been working here for FC Edmonton. There is a lot of things happening with the club, a lot of changes. We're run by the league. We don't have an owner or investor right now, but so the league is trying to find one, and hopefully that can help out with the processes, with the directions that the club will be going to. Um,
Hmm.
we are a small club. We are a small team. Uh, it's, when you're looking FC Edmonton, or I would say most of the CPL teams from outside, you're like, oh, why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing that? Like, why, but there is a lot of challenge. We are still growing. It's a new league. uh, um, so there are a lot of challenges still. We're still trying to overcome a lot of situations where, um, once we get to the next level, things are
Hmm.
going to be better, and probably we're going to have more staff, we're going to have more people working, more sponsors, and make things much easier. But
Hmm.
so far it's been challenging, which I like it. As I you know If you're listening to my story, I'm always up for a new challenge, and it's been very challenging, but I think the club is going to the right direction. Hopefully, we can announce a new owner soon, and take this club to the next level.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, I don't know, but just because I speak to people all over the place, I've heard from people in Europe, right? I had some top clubs, or they said they were very impressed with like Atletico and like what they were doing with like Atletico Madrid with Ottawa, and they were saying like they could definitely see an aspect where a lot of European teams started investing into, Canadian clubs like that. So I'm sure that's going to happen where I've even spoken to someone where it's what is the league in Ontario? The one under the CPL? I
Is it
forget what
League
it's
One?
called. League One, correct. League One, where apparently there's like some League One teams that were, in talks with Serie A teams from Italy to get purchased. So I'm sure there's something like that in the line, which would be interesting. But yeah, no, I definitely think it's just the beginning for sports like that in Canada, especially in soccer.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I guess the last two questions I like to ask every single guest is in regards to kind of just wrapping it all up, putting a bow on it. So we talked about your whole route, right? We covered all the different aspects of it. But let's say we fast forward into the future. I like to say I'm going to live until I'm 103. I'm going to be on a rocking chair just enjoying life. Well, then I wanted to ask you, if you get to 103 as well and you're on this rocking chair, what so far in your career would stand out as like a story that'd be like, wow, I can't believe I was able to do that as a career? Was it maybe you as a football player as a child, or maybe your MVP, or even maybe finally getting that position with FC Edmonton? Like what's something so far that would stand out to you even at that age?
Christopher, moving, it's not even a job, but like just moving from Brazil to Alabama to Edmonton. I think when I'm 103, I'll be like, wow, did I do that? Like that's crazy. It's amazing. And I would have done it again.
Yeah, that's something where I think unless you're actually in that position or you're in those shoes, it's harder to think about, right? Because it's harder to relate because it's basically changing your whole world, right? Where not only is it culture, geography, but literally everything, and kind of starting on from scratch. So yeah, that's something that's difficult in itself, and like I'm sure that's something that someone like you who has done it, that's something you never forget for sure. And then the last question I like to ask, and I think this is the perfect way to finish it. So you go in the future, we talk about this is something that's going to stand out to you. Well, let's say you're able to go back to 16, 18-year-old Thiago, right? And then you're able to speak to him about something you've learned so far as a piece of advice, right? Maybe when you're about to make that decision to, stop your soccer career and maybe look for schooling opportunities in North America. What's one thing that you've now learned that you wish you knew then, that you would then tell your son, to me, to the people listening, to maybe even a younger version of yourself? What's that one piece of advice that would kind of stand out?
But that one is very easy. It's you have to follow your passion. It doesn't matter if you start as a soccer player, you can become a coach. You can become, if you love soccer, there will be a space and spot for you. Maybe not as a soccer player, but as a coach, as a physiotherapy, like physiotherapist, or like you can find, if that's what you love, that's what you want to do, you're gonna find yourself in a position where you're gonna be doing what you love. And then, because I remember not just thinking that, okay, the only option for me to be in the soccer industry is if I'm a soccer player. But no, like, there is more opportunities out there that it can be very, very helpful. And you just need to know, like, if that's your passion, just follow your passion. Things are gonna come through.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the reason why I asked that question again, because I think it's a perfect way to wrap it up. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was a great conversation. Unless you have anything else to share, just thank you so much. And that's it for episode 103.
Awesome. No, thank you, Christopher, for having me here, and it was nice to share some of my experience with you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, so that's it for episode 103. Hopefully everyone enjoyed. As always, follow us on social media at The Route Sports. And don't forget to subscribe and follow the podcast on any platform that you listen on. But yeah, that's it for this week. And stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you.